All right. So, hi everyone, and welcome to Think Up. I'm Jonathan, and this little conversation seems to just be me and Martin, which is a great mix. I think. And of course, as David Ogilvy once said, you don't count the people you reach the people that count. And I think one of the reasons why this topic is quite important is because of why Think Up exists in general. Our brain is constructed of about 100 billion neurons. These nerve cells are interconnected by trillions of synapses, which are the connection devices, if you like. On average, each one of these trillions of synapses transmits about one signal per second, but some actually have 1,000 signals per second. And the transmissions come through as thoughts, and we think around 60, 70,000 thoughts per day, and 90% of them each day are the same as the day before. And I think one of my favorite quotes on this was by Zig Ziglar, who said that all bad habits start slowly and gradually, but before you know you have the habit has you. Another good way of looking at this was by a guy called Mayo Oshin, who's a great author and an interesting person, who said that there's a three-part loop sequence, which is you trigger, firstly there's a trigger, the stimulus that starts the habit, then there's a routine, which is the routine of doing the habit and the behavior itself, and then you have the reward, which is the benefit associated with the behavior. So for example, if we have, let's say, a bad habit of eating cookies after work, the habit loop would be trigger, stress from a long day at work; routine, eating a chocolate cookie; reward, temporary stress relief to feel better. According to the book Psycho-Cybernetics from 1964, there was a research piece that said that there's 21 days that it takes for an old mental image to be replaced with a new mental image. But more recently, the Journal of Social Psychology in the USA found that they have a study of 96 people. It takes a minimum of 21 days 66 days for an old mental image to be replaced. They also found in the same study that the over 96 people, that the range is actually 18 to 254 days. And so I think it's an important topic to discuss around why we make and how we can break habits. And just before Martin and I discuss this, one of the other things I just wanted to add to the intro is that I'm fascinated by how, in what I would call the impact aesthetic of our thought muscle, how we can actually change the behavior part of our habits by changing the words that we actually use to describe our habits. In a brilliant piece of research called "I Don't versus I Can't," and I'll link to all of this stuff later. It was found that after 10 days of research, 1 in 10 people who used the term "I can't" about a particular habit were able to stick to their goals, but 8 out of 10 people who use "I don't" were successful in meeting their goals. It turns out that if we place a restriction in terms of "I can't do something," in terms of "I shouldn't, I can't," it's really ineffective. If we actually say "I don't do something," "I don't eat chocolate biscuits after work," it's way more effective. And so, yeah, there you go. In intro, that's my just some thoughts that were on the top of my head. Martin, when you started thinking about joining the call about breaking and making and developing habits or taking them away, what was your initial kind of read of this topic?
Well, the main reason for me is, you just made me want biscuits now. The main reason for me was that I've always had a bit of an aversion to routine. I quite like to be sort of working in different ways all the time and so on. And so for me, I find it hard to build habits or good habits into that, just because I don't really like routines. But I can see, like, when I do start doing that, like going for a run at 6 every morning, and which I haven't been doing for a while, but while I am doing things like that, I can see the benefits. So the reason I wanted to kind of come on and discuss this was down to the idea of how to break my thinking away from thinking about routines being a bad thing in certain respects, and being just good habit behaviour, and sort of looking at it from the point of view of the reward I get from it.
Yeah.
Breaking it down a bit further, you know.
And before I forget, so we'll go into that rabbit hole. And before I forget, I read a piece of research recently that said that it's 10 times faster, or even more, I think, 10 times faster to create a new habit if you learn it through play, as opposed to if you learn it through rote. Now, this is your field of expertise.
Yeah, it is indeed. My goal is to bring play into the workplace a lot more through Lego series play, improv, all those different things, to create faster problem solving and break people out of the habitual thinking, really.
Have you got, and just whilst we're on this point, and bearing in mind the last video I did, I enabled Emma Jackson to share her website info, because I think it's something that could be useful for people who are watching. Have you got a resource online or a way of people contacting you about that? Or
it's mundonovus.com, so it's MUNDONOVUS, which is
great.
A kind of terrible Latin version of New World, essentially.
Oh, it's not bad Latin. It's pretty good. It's
Well, I think Mundo Novo may have been the correct. I'm not.
Well, I was going to say that, but yeah, it's near enough. That Latin's close enough. Good. So good. So people can go there and find out more about the play side of things. But let's return to the play habitual behaviour learnings in a second. But start with whether or not we feel that habits. I mean, do we think that habits actually have a negative connotation associated to them because they sound a bit like routine?
In certain respects, I do, because as I said, like one of my focuses is trying to break people out of habitual thinking. So I think when we rely on habits, sometimes we're relying on a situation where we're not properly thinking sometimes. So, and obviously bad habits come under this quite a lot. But I see it within organisations. And people themselves make decisions just because that's the kind of given area they work in, and so it's they're never going to come up with anything new and radical that way.
Yeah, I've observed this as well in my career, and I have over time used or enabled people to try different methods of breaking habits. One of which is in terms of awareness of, for instance, where were you when the craving showed up to do whatever it is? At what point during the day does this happen? What was your emotional state? Who were you with? What happened before you felt this way? How did it make you feel after doing it? And actually quantifying, in a kind of journalizing that experience to actually analyze the reason why. For instance, when I was much heavier in weight, and emotional burden, there was my default nighttime relaxation methodology was a giant pizza and at least one bottle of red wine on my own. And the pizza, what was amazing is there's a particular type of pizza, and it was a stuffed crust Pizza Hut deep pan meat feast, supreme, and it cost about 20 quid, and it had like 12 or 15 slices. It's massive. It was one for a family, basically.
Yeah.
But that made me feel, buying it made me feel as if I was comfortable, but even 3 slices in, it made me feel like crap. And then by the end of it, I could barely move. And then I would be in this remorse. But then the next night, I would find myself buying a stuffed crust super supreme meat feast, because that's what I did to feel more comfortable. And it was a very strange, unrewarding circumstance that had a very, very short reward time built in. And it took a real immense. I found it easier to stop smoking than to stop eating pizza.
Yeah, Did you feel that it become a ritual rather
Yeah.
than anything else?
A ritual de la habitual, yes, it's the brilliant Jane's Addiction album. So yeah, it was a ritual. Yeah, it was not dissimilar to any form of practice that anyone would do mindlessly, essentially. Have you had any like that?
Yeah, quite a few.
Good.
Historically, I was brought up Catholic, so yeah, I had that built in childhood. But I've lapsed heavily into atheism. So
Can you lapse into atheism? Let's just look down that rabbit hole just
yeah, go on.
gently. I am of the mindset that atheism is a theology as much as Catholicism.
You could be right. I think the natural default for me is agnosticism, to admit that I don't know. And I think the atheism part of it comes in because I feel more attuned to that side of not believing that there is a God. So yes, there is a belief system built in there. I think you're correct on that.
I mean, yeah, but it's interesting with religious habits that I'm aware that there is a thought, for instance, that the habit of praying somehow brings us closer to God. And to make an incredibly tenuous link between praying and pizza, I felt that eating pizza brought me closer to being comfortable.
Yeah, I fully understand that.
Yeah, that was really hard, that one, pizza.
I had a similar one with ice cream. To Ben and Jerry's, a big tub of Ben and Jerry's and just eat that in one sitting quite often, night after night. So yeah, that was particularly bad.
I've had another thought of how I've helped people break from the habits. One of the methodologies that's worked quite well is in terms of impact, and similarly to journalizing habits, actually creating a clarity, enabling oneself to have the clarity of an objective, and then mapping whatever habits one person has to how much it serves the objective. And I think that it was Bryant McGill, the human potential thought leader, who said that the secret to permanently breaking any bad habit is to love something greater than the habit itself. And that actually had been quite an effective way of mapping backwards from something that actually is loved as an objective, and then being able to map it backward into your life. Did you use that type of methodology?
Yeah, well, there's with various different things, like having had a smoking habit when I was at college, and obviously the ice cream habit was pretty worrying. And so my big worry on that was I didn't want to end up diabetic.
Right.
So I kept that as my goal for knocking that one on the head. The smoking was much more of a ritual-based system because I worked in recording studios. Often we worked through the night. Mm-hmm. Just to get a break. There isn't anything else to do at night, really, than just go out and have a cigarette. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to go out and have a walk around the areas of Liverpool that I was in during the night so much. And so the cigarette became like a ritual thing to just go out and have a break from the studio, chat about something else. And I think that kind of broke pretty quickly after I stopped working nights in studios.
That's interesting. So it was a circumstantial context, but you've hit on something interesting with smoking, because that there is a psychological difference between the terminology of addiction versus a habit. And there's the NHS guidance and various different health services would class that the notable difference between habit and addiction is that addiction is something that is disease linked, and the amount of time and effort required to make the required change is different. Altering habits requires theoretically minimal effort, time, and attention. Addiction, on the other hand, often demands an integrative, long-term plan to treat the physical symptoms like withdrawal, as well as the emotional disconnect between body and behavior. So in those kind of differentials, I think there is when you mention smoking, there's the disease of addiction part of that.
Yeah.
But then it would seem there's the contextual habit of that's what one does between recording sessions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although if you look at epigenetics in terms of the fact that body doesn't necessarily know whether we've experienced something or whether we're remembering experiencing something, there is a very strong argument, as illustrated brilliantly in You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza and latterly in Becoming Supernatural, that when, for instance, someone is about to take a drug, the expectation of that drug is the thing that actually triggers the effect of the drug, to such an extent that if you gave someone a gram of cocaine, or looks like a gram of cocaine, their experience of that gram of cocaine is identical to if they actually did have a gram of cocaine, because actually our cellular genetics, the proteins that make up our genes, are actually expecting that to such an extent. Any form of stimulus that triggers that then has the experience. I've often thought that one of the ways that we could consider in terms of reducing drug use is by legalizing absolutely everything and then gradually integrating placebos into society.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the epigenetic argument is strong enough to carry that. It's a big topic, and one that I think that we're probably at the verge of discovering more of. On back to the play side of things.
Yeah.
Do you believe it's possible in what you do through play, improv, those type of tools, to break any form of habit or addiction, or is it exclusively for? Well, firstly, is it exclusively for business? Secondly, is it exclusively to business habits of thought? Third, is it possible that set of tools could be used to alter any form of addiction as well as habit?
I think so. I think with regards to being exclusive to business, that's not the case at all. Play's great, obviously, for learning and discovery in general, and whether that's about yourself on a personal mission, or whether it's about just self-improvement in any way, on a personal or collaborative group level. It works in various different ways, or for various different settings, really. So in terms of breaking habits with play, I think we can break the thinking, or the lazy thinking, of, like, you know, if I'm in a recording studio at night, I go out for a cigarette. Like there is some discovery that I could go through with an element of play to figure out that, well, I don't need the cigarette. You know, we can just go out and have a chat out in the different area away from the studio, just to get that break. The cigarettes, just because that's what we do, and it's that ritualistic, habitual thinking of that's what we do, so let's go and do that.
Yeah.
So I think there's some discovery that you can bring out through play on virtually anything, really. You can if you look at the way that kids use play from the moment they're born, it is all about discovery, and by the time they're 3, they've pretty much learned the rudimentary parts of a language and how to use their bodies enough to start walking around and picking up things, which is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a terrible thing for your final record collection.
I like that. There's I've often wondered whether the habits that we enable our children to learn via play construct a framework of the world that's actually quite profound and only realizable in retrospect. For instance, in an airport, in Miami airport 2 days ago, there were two young boys who spent pretty much the entire time fighting. And one could think, I mean, these were 5-year-olds, 4 5-year-olds, maybe 4-year-olds. One could think that that's what 4-year-olds do. They roll around and they fight. And I was listening to what they were saying to each other, albeit in Spanish, but they were adopting various different scenarios. One was saying, okay, now I'm going to pretend to kill you, and you're going to pretend to kill me, or I'm going to try and drown you, and you're going to try and drown me. And the mother was blissfully on her phone doing whatever social media stuff, while these children were role-playing murder. And as a parent myself, I was thinking, well, did I allow my children to, or did I ignore that form of aggressive behavior, or was it actually part of being a child, of what they do? Is that what we do as kids? We the games we're playing tend to have a dominant actor.
Yeah. Well, I think there's in those sort of games we play as children, there is a common thread through wherever you are in society that that young kids, specifically boys, really will pick up sticks and use them as a gun.
Yeah.
And there is an element that we all kind of, it's like a rite of passage, I suppose, that we all go through something like that. And it's perhaps to play with those ideas of what it would feel like to cause somebody else harm or even kill somebody else. And I don't know if there may be a growth of empathy for other people through that.
True. And how about when at school the physical education teachers say, okay, you're a girl, therefore you're playing netball, you're a boy, therefore you're playing football. And you're a boy, that you're wearing blue, you're a girl, you're wearing pink. You're a girl, you're doing cookery classes, you're a boy, you're doing mechanics. And whether these in themselves are habit setting frameworks that we accidentally sleepwalk into because it's the way that things have always been done.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of the good things over the last sort of few decades that's really being challenged within schools and within society itself. So I think it is that we have a lot of shared habitual thinking within all our societies that we then don't understand when we look back in different parts of history, and a society might have been more of a matriarchy rather than a male-driven society.
Yeah,
and those things are quite interesting to me because sometimes, there might be outliers, but they also show that there are different ways of organising society, and perhaps we are just habitually sleepwalking into things in the wrong way.
Yeah, I wonder that. I'm concerned that there is there's a great book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is linked to this, that our addiction to the media, our kind of mindless media, is creating such negative habits in terms of our thought processes and our expectations. And we see it from, my girlfriend and I were looking at this selfie being taken by a lady a couple of days ago somewhere, and she did the whole trout pout kind of thing, and there seems to be a habit of that kind of that kind of look is accepted in the media. It's what we see. It's what we see our idols potentially looking like, or the celebrities, or the Instagram celebrities doing. But I think I've become either less judgmental over the years or more understanding of why we behave like we behave and why we have the habits we have. I eventually started to rather than look externally at other people's habits and go, why would people do that? And more internally as to why would I do that?
Yeah.
And I started to look more internally. I started to become more accepting of other people's bad habits because I was riddled with them myself.
Well, I think as a human being, as Homo sapiens as we are, I think it's built into our systems to be sociable. It's the reason why the stronger, bigger Neanderthals died out, and the weaker, smaller Homo sapiens continued. It's because that we were using our brains for a more of a sociable way of life, and it's arguable that's the reason that we survived when they didn't, when we were living in largely the same areas with the same food supplies and so on, and they were physically stronger than us. So I think, you know, that's that social aspect to why we do things is because we do want to fit in. My thinking on it is that we're probably outliers in this because we have we're looking at things from that point of view of being an outsider and trying to put our sort of divergent thinking into why would this be the case that people do the trout out, or the one that annoyed my wife the other day was a friend of ours had put a picture on Facebook of her on holiday and had her legs and feet in the photo. My wife absolutely lost it.
Why is that? What's wrong with that?
People often put their legs in the photo, and my wife, for some reason, has a problem with this.
No, do we mean the legs in the photo as in hot dogs or legs? The hot dogs.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh. But she had a real problem with it, and it just made me laugh a lot that she really railed against it so much. Wow. But I think the reason we do think these things is because it's to be part of the gang. It's to be part of that social scene.
Well, there is a strong theory of human evolution that the difference between humans and animals is in three parts. One is that we are aware of our immortality. The second is that we're curious about some form of otherness that is controlling us or is higher than us. And the third is to be socially fit and to fit in. And I would say that most of the habits when I was younger were based on the social fit habits. You know, I started smoking because the bullies smoked, and actually I was able to acquire cigarettes for them and get bullied slightly less if I did, and therefore I'm kind of and smoking at the same time. I started drinking Jack Daniels because Slash from Guns N' Roses was on the cover of a Guitar World magazine with. He's got his leather trousers on, he's got his top hat, he's got a bottle of Jack Daniels. You must know the image, right? And so my view was that Slash, if I wanted to be cool, then I would smoke Marlboro Reds, because there's a packet of Marlboro Reds next to him. So there's a Marlboro Red packet and there's a Jack Daniels, and he's playing a Gibson Les Paul. So a lot of the habits that I got into were constructed on wanting to fit in or wanting to be that guy.
Yeah.
You know, that Slash was, for me, I mean, I've later met him and actually realised that he's the almost total opposite of the person that I thought the rock star would be. He's a relatively quietly spoken geek, actually. He's a massive guitar geek. All he actually does is play guitar, really. And all he ever really did was play guitar. I mean, there was a smack and the crack and the heroin, the coke and the drinking and stuff. But out of 24 hours, most of those hours are actually playing the guitar. And now all of the rest of that stuff's dropped. I mean, he doesn't even smoke cigarettes anymore. All he actually does is play guitar.
Yeah. But it is funny how we get these ideas, and I mean, the media obviously sells a lot of these things to us, and causes us to have some of these bad habits. It's no surprise that a lot of people smoked throughout the 50s and 60s when cigarette advertising brought Joe Camel into the equation and Marlboro Man into the equation, because it gave us that feeling we want to be in that gang.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big thing to be said for trying to build in more of a questioning of our habitual thinking through schooling, really. And if we can be more critical about what's going on around us and what we're doing ourselves, I think that's and having the tools to actually properly investigate that would be a great thing. So part of the reason I really enjoy Think Up is that we're building those tools.
I agree, and I think it's funny actually. If someone said to me, if you can only pick one thing to change about the education system, what would it be? I would, and there's quite a number of things. But by the way, there's lots of the education system that's brilliant, of course. So and actually, I'm a massive fan of. People don't realise, especially in primary school, the brilliance of some of the teachers who are just, who enable the philosophical understanding discussions and things like that. If I had to change one thing, it would be the increase of critical thinking into the teenage years, because I think that critical thinking is more of a factor, I've observed anyway, between the primary school age to the end of that era for them. So let's say ages of 4 or 5 to 10 or 11. And then from 12 onwards, I've observed that it's less to do with thinking critically and more to do with achieving exactly what Ofsted or whatever your examination system has stipulated as you need to know this to achieve this grade. Whereas when one of my closest friends is a primary school teacher who regularly, like daily, their first starting point of the day is to discuss something. Anything, not linked to an exam or something, just discuss a topic,
Yeah. I noticed that with my daughter's schooling, that there was a lot more time for those discussions in her primary school, and some of her teachers, like my daughter came home one time saying that the teacher had let her table carry on talking for another half an hour because they were discussing I don't know what it was, something in the news, maybe Trump's Trump winning the presidency at the time or something like that was in the news, and so he was quite interested that these 8-9-year-olds were having an in-depth discussion about these kind of things, and so he allowed that discussion to continue rather than stick to whatever lesson plan he may have had.
That's great. That's an example of teaching. I like that. So in closing, and to apply this exact kind of framework of questioning our habits to Think Up itself, the habit that I've been following, I've fallen into, is to set up a call time and to invite people to it. And very, very few people turn up to the call, but quite a lot of people watch the videos afterwards. What I'm wondering is whether that habit is the right habit for Think Up, and whether a different habit for Think Up would be to have a perpetual invitation to anyone who would like to talk about something, and so actually have it as a reactive discussion thing rather than a proactive.
I think there might be more mileage in that, and I guess also if we can pin something down that's happening in the news or in society at this specific moment, that we can investigate in a way that brings in either breaking habitual thinking or some element of critical thinking, you might get more people in. But
I like that.
It's
okay. So in other words, so let's say something happens, and then I could then anyone could then put in Think Up group. This has happened. What do we think about this topic under this context? Who would like to discuss it? And then we'll actually see in the conversation whether that warrants having a video call about it.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, let's call that the new habit then. and thanks for you being the person on this call. Funnily enough, just as you entered the call, I had actually started recording just some like probably a half an hour rant about habits and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you joined just at the second that I just pressed record, and then you joined. I was like, oh, fantastic, great. Delete, restart. And so, the reason I sounded so eloquent at the beginning of the call was because I was literally just about to say this stuff.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. No, that's good. It's really helped to break into a good, quite wide-ranging conversation as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about with play and breaking habits through play is the work of Jean Piaget and his constructivism, that we build models in our minds. And the great thing about play, particularly using Lego or clay or something we get our hands on, even painting and drawing. The reason I use Lego generally is because the barrier for access is quite low, so you don't have to have that much skill. But in creating things in 3D, we can really start to rebuild those models in our heads. And so part of that is changing our habitual thinking and changing what we actually think about some given subject or topic.
That's brilliant. And actually, good. I'm glad that you ended on that point, because I want to give you another plug for your site again.
Okay.
And I'm going to write the link in the comments. So how do you spell the site?
MUN.
Yeah.
DO.
Yeah.
NOVUS.
NOVUS. Good. So I'm gonna include that link in the comments once I've published the video as well, because I think every company would benefit from looking at that. And by the sounds of it, actually, because we're not actually talking about just business, I think in general there's probably there's more even more that could be useful. Do you actually do any stuff with schools or colleges or universities?
Not yet. I mean, I've done some stuff with Liverpool University, but that's really only a group of their lecturers rather than anything else.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's an area that I'm starting to investigate a little more.
Good. Well, I will. I think more power to you. I'll include the link in the comments section, or the description when I publish this. Good. Thank you, Martin.
No problem. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks. I'll speak to you again soon.
Certainly will, mate. Cheers, dude.
Yeah. Bye.